Cassia, the navigator for your crew and a very valuable officer member of the party. Cassia is one of the most broken companions in the game because of her unique origin. Her unique origin is navigator, and it does a whole lot. It can do everything from damage to buff, and it just works very nicely. Whilst Cassia doesn't come with a homeworld, she doesn't need to with the amount of benefits that she gets from her class, as it is like an archetype in itself. In this update, we had a decision between going between Grand Strategist and Overseer. Grand Strategist is very OP in itself, so I have updated and remodified the original build, which you can find on the spreadsheet. However, for this video, we're actually going to focus on the Overseer, which has the unique ability of the Servo Skull Swarm to double use Bring It Down. It can also apply officer buffs in an AoE based around the Servo Skull, as well as giving smaller buffs to your allies and other little features. Even though you build Cassia as a pure support type, she can still be built into heavy damage, having up to 3 attacks a turn just by being an Overseer and using a devastating staff. Each one of Cassia's attacks tends to build up the damage of the next one and then lower enemy stats for your allies to get involved. She also has a high AoE stun as well as many other buffing options. Cassia can also apply buffs naturally herself in AoE, which makes her a perfect candidate for going Overseer. The only thing that we lose, that we don't like to lose, is the ability to go first. However, this can be remedied in Act 4 with the Commander's Chrono, but you'll find that Cassia is so tanky she can survive anyway. It just means that your party might be a little bit slower to one turn, as they might act before they've had their buffs, but you're likely going to still get that finest hour, and with all the buffs, still one turn most encounters on unfair. As I talk about the archetype abilities, some of these are going to have assumed knowledge, which will mean that I've expected people to already be aware or to go away and read what they do in game. This is going to be a lot of the officer stuff, but I will briefly explain what they do. To get the exact number specifics, you are going to want to check that out. As some of the navigator powers, I am going to discuss those a little bit more so you understand why I take them. So Cassia comes pre-built to rank 4, and you will probably have her at level 5 with a choice of what you go into that level after her first battle. So she starts off with Voice of Command, like all officers, and her first skill is Persuasion. Persuasion is incredibly useful to build into because of the Inquisitor's Tenant item that you can get at the end of Act 2. Rank 3, you get Bring It Down, which is obviously gives extra turn to allies and is one of the most powerful abilities in the game. Finest Hour is the heroic action that comes with this, which again breaks the game by removing attack limit on attacks, so you can use attacks to AP. Inspire Courage gives additional health based on your willpower, so it's quite useful for Cassia, so we're going to heavily build into willpower. The first stats we're going to upgrade is going to be willpower, perception, and then fellowship. You might think it is weird to do fellowship last for an officer, but part of her navigator abilities increases her fellowship. We start with Mastery of Time, which is allies in combat that are given next turn will give a +5 stacking bonus to willpower to Cassia up to 25. Lasting Impression will give half of your voice command buffs after the first round, and because of that 2-round cooldown, this is very useful to have. We'll take more willpower, and then it will go into Air of Authority. Normally I go into Reveal the Light or Held in My Gaze at this point, but because of the Overseer and the pet's ability to recast officer abilities to the entire squad, it's more important to focus on that, in my opinion. We take Eye of Oblivion, which debuffs enemies based on their dodge and hit chance in your line of sight from perception. Inspiring Speech will give allies that are targeted by Air Authority more momentum. We take more Persuasion early on, and then we take Finest Hour Upgrade 4. This is the most overpowered thing because it lowers the cost of non-attacking abilities by 1 AP, and that can be 0 dust, making them free. Rank 10, we start upgrading Law Warp. The reason I do Law Warp is because navigators use their Law Warp check to get Navigator Insight when exploring Act 2 and 4. So this is a very important skill, but if you feel like doing a different fellowship, then have at you. We also increase Perception. Perception can be used for dodge as well as debuffs. Rank 11, we get Ebb and Flow. Every even turn, the navigator gains additional action point. Every odd turn, they get +20 Perception. We can increase Perception more. Rank 12, you have an ability option. Reveal the Light if you want to buff allies' willpower and toughness, or Held in My Gaze if you want to do damage to the enemies. You can take either point here, and then in tier 2 we'll take the other. We also take Strange Vitality that will start giving Cassia regenning health based on this. Now at rank 13, I have Blood Augury, which increases warp damage that enemies suffer whenever you use her navigator powers. But because I took Reveal the Light here, the only way to use Blood Glory is Little Astaire. So you could very easily change this to Mind Over Matter, which means your health pool comes from your willpower instead of your toughness. I do take the other one later, so if you want to switch this around, then this is a good one to switch. I have put a note of this in the spreadsheet. Rank 13, we then take more Law Warp, and we then at rank 14 get Fellowship and Pass Unscathed, so we use our Perception for our dodge. The last final style upgrade we take is number 1, which gives us extra damage during that extra turn. Cassia's game plan here is going to be to buff allies, give them stats, give them extra turns, and then do some area ability stun damage. Or if you go into Held My Gaze, if you give her a final style from another officer, she will nuke down even Aurora. The best pet for Cassia is definitely the Servo Skull Swarm. What it seems to do is give extra uses of Bring It Down even before you pick up Energy Multiplier. This might be a bug, but in the test version, it wasn't working at all. And now in the live version, it's working even without Energy Multiplier. So I'm not quite sure. But it is intended, but with or without the talent remains to be seen. Starting off, what the Servo Skull Swarm does is it allows you to send your abilities to your allies based on casting on your Servo Skull Swarm. So it will send out the officer abilities to all allies, and then if you bring it down an ally, you'll get more extra turns. So at rank 2, I start with Held in My Gaze. If you've not picked up Reveal the Light, this is where you pick up Reveal the Light. I take Energy Multiplier, which is meant to give +5 characteristics to the skull and also give a second use to bring it down, but like I said, that might just be working by default. Overcharge is the first upgrade. The Servo Skull Swarm immediately heals to full wounds. The Overseer's next 3 abilities cost 1 AP less. Until the end of combat, the Overseer's allies ignore the cover of enemies that are under surveillance. Additionally, allies with a full cell radius around the Servo Skull Swarm are immune to critical hits. Very good defensive power here, as well as slightly offensive for your ranged characters. Rank 6, we get an AP increase and we start increasing willpower. Rank 5. At rank 6, however, we take Emergency Stimulation. Once per combat, the Servo Skull Swarm can save an ally. If that ally suffers lethal damage in a 4-cell radius around the Servo Skull Swarm, that ally regains Servo Skull Swarm's Fellowship bonus divided by 3% of their maximum wounds and remains in combat. Then the Overseer Skull Swarm suffers 100 minus the Overseer's Medicaid divided by 5% shock damage. You also then get some willpower. Strategic Adaptation is an incredibly useful upgrade for Cassia. Depending on the Familiar's number of wounds, the Overseer or the Familiar gain a special benefit 1 round. Less than 50% wounds, the next 3 hits against Familiar have their damage reduced, but over 50%, the Overseer deals more damage with their next attack. If that attack kills a target, it does not count towards the attack limit per turn, and the Overseer regains any AP spent on it. Incredibly powerful for Cassia. It increases her attack economy, and in fact it's one of the only ways that she can do that. We then take Law Warp and Master's Patronage. At the start of the Overseer's turn, the Familiar gains temporary wounds equal to the Fellowship bonus of the Overseer. We then get Perception and Mind Over Matter. The Navigator makes all resistance tests with their willpower if it is higher than the base characteristic of such tests. If the Navigator's willpower is higher than the toughness, the Navigator wounds are calculated according to their willpower. Very good here. For Mind Over Matter, yes, this is where you get the HP. You can swap this around with Blood Augury if you want us to do it the other way around. Like I said, the note is on the sheet. Rank 10, we get Safe Shelter. If the Overseer or their allies are protected by partial cover in a 4-cell radius around the Servo Skull Swarm, they are considered protected by full cover. Very useful. We then at rank 11 get Perception and Small Warp. At rank 12 we take Overcharge upgrade 3. Whenever the Overseer uses an archetype ability, the Overseer and their Familiar gain 1 deflection until the end of combat. This stacks. Rank 13 Symbiosis. When the Overseer extrapolates an ability through the Servo Skull for the first time in the round, they regain 1 AP. Then take Unnatural Law. The Navigator gains +5 Fellowship and an additional +1 Fellowship for every Navigator talent or power taken. Very useful for building up that Fellowship. Rank 14, more Fellowship, then some Persuasion, then we take Mend Reality. This can be an AoE infusing buff. The Navigator decreases Veil Degradation by willpower bonus. All allies gain willpower bonus deflection against all warp damage and damage from psychic powers until the end of the Navigator's turn. So very useful AoE buff. Rank 16, we take Tenacity. Navigator powers deal +1 additional damage for every 5 bonus characteristics of the Navigator's currently equipped staff, cascading, fusing, and devastating counters characteristics for this talent. At the moment, both staffs are counting, and that is a bug, and it seems to have been introduced with shields. We also take Undamned Sea of Souls. Whilst under the effects of Navigator powers, enemies have their armor reduced by 25. This reduction is increased by devastating parameter of Navigator staff, but does not stack, so it's useful for when you use an attacking power. I normally take this earlier on my Grand Strategist build, but we take it a little bit later in the pet build. Rank 17, Fellowship and Persuasion, and at rank 18 we get Unseen Support. Whilst the Overseer is 5 or more cells away from the Service Skull Swarm, their Fellowship is increased by 16. So if you're outside of your own radius and then you throw that out there, big buffs. We at rank 19 take Veil of Protection. All allies that are targeted by Navigator powers gain 10% armor. This additional armor is reduced by the amount of Veil degradation and is increased by the infusing parameter of the currently equipped Navigator staff. Very powerful. And at rank 20, we take Overcharge 1. It might not be the best one here, but whenever the familiar becomes target of an enemy attack, the Overseer has their damage dealt increased by 2%. The effects stack and last until the end of combat. Now that we have the pet, we're going to move this to increase our allies' cover, to throw out more supports, and throw out more buffs, and we can also sometimes save our front line. This is a very powerful upgrade to the Overseer, and it changes the way the gameplay, as you can see with the footage behind us. Tier 3 for Cassia is just more winning. It doesn't add anything new to her game plan, but just continues enhancing it. First, we get Eager for Battle, so that first turn we get +2 AP. Steel Resolve will increase our Officer Resolve by 3. Brothers in Arms will increase our Resolve by 2 when we're around the pet. This also works for allies. We'll then take some more Willpower and Under My Protection. Rank 3 is Under My Protection. This will allow allies to get extra bonuses that have been under the effects of Navigator powers. Rank 4, I take Get Back in the Fight, but you could alternatively take another Navigator power here, like Waking Nightmare. I also continue to finish up Law Warp. Rank 5, we take Firebrand, the Exemplar talent that will give us an extra 1 AP to our Bring It Downs. We also take Dependable Ally, which will, whenever the familiar's ability is used on ally, for 1 round, that ally gains +5 to characteristics considered to be key characteristics of the familiar, which is Fellowship and Intelligence. We then get more Willpower. Decisive Response will reduce the cost of Bring It Down, so that's just nice. Rank 7, we take Medicaid Signal. At the start of the turn, each ally in a 4-cell radius around the Service Skull Swarm gains 16 wounds, with a 35% chance to remove 1 injury. Does not affect unconscious allies. When you're not going first, this is very helpful. Less useful when you've got Commander's Chrono, so if you want to replace this, you can. We also increase our perception. Right of Calibration will lower the cost of moving or activating a signal on the first turn by 1 AP for the first use of powers. We then take the Course Untraveled, which is another Navigator power that every time we use powers, we get +2 perception. Only the first time we've used a different one. More powers, more perceptions. Then take Persuasion and Eager Subordinates. When allies take actions on extra turns given by this character, they deal 15% more damage. With the extra Bring It Downs, this is very useful. Rank 10, we get some more AP, then we get Armor of Contempt. Back end, late game armor increase, which you could take earlier, but I don't see much for use of it front or back end of the game with just how powerful the hyper aggressive is. But if they ever change to limit attack economy, this might be more useful early. More Persuasion, and then we get Blood of Martyrs. Whenever an ally uses a heroic act, that ally gains temporary wounds equal to 10% of their maximum wounds +14. Useful for any Death World characters or anyone that's stacking temporary wounds like Malpain Shroud users. Then get more Medicaid so our Service Skull doesn't destroy itself. Armored Hide, attacks against familiar have their critical hit chance reduced. More Perception, more Fellowship, more Medicaid. Combat Meditation just to give us some 15 willpower, and then we take Focus, which will help increase the ballistic score of allies. We then take Stable Roots, which whenever the Navigator uses Navigator power, Veil degradation is reduced by 1. More Medicaid, and then we get Be Vigilant. This is a way to increase our allies' weapon skill. Then picking up towards the end of Guide of Souls. At this point, rank 18, I take Waking Nightmare. You could take Priority Signal, but it is nice to get some debuffs in there, especially for final boss showcases. More Fellowship and Flag Bearer. For allies within 2 cells around the character, deal 12% more damage, and because Cassia can be in the front, there's no reason not to have it. If you did take Get Back in the Fight, Wounds is no excuse as an upgrade here, but if you've taken something else there, you want to take a different upgrade. But that will finish us at rank 20, and at this point, we are just giving out very high buffs, very high attack economy, lots of Bring It Downs, guaranteed finest hour because of Inquisitor Tier. Yeah, no, incredibly strong build. It just overwhelmed the enemies. It is ridiculous. As with all the previous videos, moving on to items, these may not be the best items because it's just what I had access to in the developer version. It has now gone live, so I could change them, but I didn't run through and test them. So if you find better stuff, then you are free to swap them, depending on if you're using Cassia as a overseer or as a grand strategist. You might change whether it's Jay or Cassia that uses Medal of Alacrity, but it gives 1 extra axe point to bring it down. So you had the Commander's Combrono because it's just useful, Commander's Monocle because it was quite useful for giving extra damage to allies next turn. Slick Body Glove gives extra dodge, but her dodge is already through the goddamn roof. I took Emerald Cherub Ring, which was giving us +5 to the Fellowship and increased our resolve, so we have 15 resolve, so it is pretty nice. Black Signet Ring of the Inquisition. This ring is absolutely overpowered. What this does is it gives us momentum, it removes all negative effects, it grants persuasion, temporary wounds, armor, and deflection to all allies until the end of combat. It is incredibly busted. For your powers, Thrice Pioneer's Braces was a way just to lower enemies' weapon skill and ballistic skill, especially with her AoE stun, very useful. Mercy's Gift will give us 15 fellowship to when we don't have enemies in full cells. Sororitas Boots I was using towards the end because we weren't going first. Just getting kills with Little Astaire was just giving us heroic acts before we had the Inquisitor Tenant. Now that we do have Inquisitor Tenant, you don't need it as much, but you can abuse building up momentum a lot more with this. You can switch these boots out as you see fit. Staffs I had was the Astronomicum Regalia, and I was using the Uvaf Glaf Staff. Mostly because of the Devastating and the passives on that, and this one obviously because of the Infusing. Very powerful build. The alternative build for this is going to be the Grand Strategist, which is linked in the spreadsheet. So for those of you that are looking to enjoy the going first and just winning before enemies can interact, you are going to want to look at the Grand Strategist build. This is linked in the spreadsheet below, along with the build that I just showed you. So if you want to run through and look at what I've done, you can see that this is going to be on the Lex tab on the live version. I hope you found this helpful. If you have, like, subscribe, all that stuff, send this video out to friends or even just a spreadsheet. And I'll see you all on any streams. And if you have any questions, do comment below.